Good morning, everyone. This will be your 2-minute warning. If we can start to find our seats, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. Thank you.
You're local now?
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming back. I hope everybody had a good night last night. You find someplace fun to go, I hope. Greg, you want to gavel us back in and let's get started?
Sure. Good morning. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us again this morning. Thank you for a great afternoon yesterday. I think it was a good, productive meeting. Learned a lot of interesting stuff. Looking forward to more of that today, so I will call us to order.
All right. Before we get started, just a couple of quick notes. The guys do a pretty good job of turning down your microphones when you're not speaking, but if you decide to turn it off, you press the button on it, the light will go off. Your mic is no longer hot. If you try to speak and that light is not on, no one will hear you, and your voice will go into the void. It will embarrass you a little bit by asking you to turn your mic on. So please make sure that you turn your microphones back on before making anything. I'll also ask you to speak directly into it. Make sure you're facing the microphone. If you turn your head, the microphone will stop working as well, and we will lose the important things that you have to add to the conversation. So make sure you get it nice and close to you. And then the last thing I want to say is yesterday we did pretty good about feeling free to interrupt our presenters a little bit, and I mean that in the good way. When we have important clarifying questions that we needed to get straight so that we could understand the slide better, go ahead and put your card up and we can get those answered right away. Any questions, comments, concerns about our agenda today before we get started? Please identify yourselves, and I'll identify myself. My name is James Tanner. I'm your facilitator for the day. And before you make a comment, please identify yourselves again so that we can have an accurate record for the meeting minutes. Thank you, everyone. Did that do it? We good? We straight? Amy says I'm straight now, so we're good. All right. Up first, we have the Quail Management overview. Andy, you ready to get started?
Good morning. I'm Andy Horker. I'm going to do this Crackerneck Management overview. If you'll look at your seats, you all have a brochure from Crackerneck so that I can distract you from looking at me. And there's a map and some of the typical rules they have for interacting out there at Crackerneck. Crackerneck is one of the many hidden gems of Savannah River's site. It is open to the public. You don't have to go out there with an escort, but I'm going to get into all that stuff. I work for the Assistant Manager for Infrastructure and Environmental Stewardship in the EQMD, Environmental Management and Quality Management Division. Cracker Neck is managed by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. It's about 10,600 acres, so that's a good chunk of dirt. On behalf of DOE through a cooperative agreement. In fact, we are signing a new cooperative agreement here very shortly because the fiscal year starts October 1 and the old one ends, so a new one starts. It's predominantly bottomland hardwoods, Carolina bays, upland forests, fields, ponds, and some other things. It's public access, which is controlled to about 70 days a year. On those 70 days, they have to staff an area where the public comes and checks in, says, I'm going in. Then the public comes and checks out, says, I'm out. And that's the hosted check-in, and that's how they address what is typically a remote worker process on site. So everywhere else on site, you report in what square mile you're in on the site. There, there's a little more freedom. So, how did this get started? Back in the 70s, it was allowed to be managed and incorporated, or managed and folded effectively into the Sumter National Forest, and the Forest Service handled all of that management. You may be aware that the Forest Service has been out managing land on Savannah River site since the 50s, since the inception. At that time, back in the 70s, it was enrolled into the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources Wildlife Management Program, and they allowed year-round access for fishing and non-consumptive use. Then as we rolled into 84, it was folded back out of an open public access, and it was determined that people generally used it about 22 days a year. So that's how long they kept it open. Since that time, in 87, it was folded back to a wildlife management area, predominantly managed by the Department of Natural Resources again. And that's who continues to serve today. Here's the proclamation that was signed back in 99, by the Secretary of Energy and the Director of DNR. And that just says, we think you guys are doing a great job and you should keep on doing it, right? If you look at this map, and it appears a little bit washed on the screen, but you can get an idea of where Cracker Neck is right over here on this western portion of the site. And here's an aerial view of Cracker Neck, just Cracker Neck itself pulled out. You can see the roads, and here's the Savannah River, so this would be your bottomland hardwood areas and upland pines, and et cetera. Right there is that check station I was talking about right outside of Jackson. So today they continue, the Department of Natural Resources continues as the primary manager. They have that new cooperative agreement, and it's a 60-40 split in that cooperative agreement. So DOE's covering 60% of their costs. DNR is covering 40% of their costs. So everybody's got a little bit of skin in the game. Everybody has an interest in this being successful. They're also working with the Forest Service on site because the Forest Service manages those natural resources, and they have certain skill sets that DNR does not necessarily actively employ, especially on site with the specific site ways we do things. So they work together and manage the resources out there. DNR also provides law enforcement. So you remember I said a little earlier about check-in. So they're checking in at that check station in the event that they had to tell everybody, let's crawl on out of here. You know, let's go and end our hunting, hiking, fishing day a little bit early. And this happened not long ago. There was a pretty big storm coming in, and it was pretty seamless. They rolled on, everybody kind of came on out, they rolled through, easy, clear out of the property. And of course, that law enforcement is also game, fish and game, keep everybody in compliance with the state regulations. They're open September through May for approximately 70 days. So again, every time they're open, somebody is full-time sitting at that check station. making sure everybody's out. And those are typically Fridays and Saturdays, as well as Thanksgiving Day. And they commonly see over 3,000 visitors a year. What are people doing out there? Well, wildlife management areas run by the state are typically hunting, fishing-driven areas. So they're hunting and fishing. Now, you see, to hunt and fish, you typically will carry a firearm. You're only allowed to carry the firearm for the season for what's on your license. So you don't just, it's not like the rest of the state outside of the site where you can carry whatever's legal. Things that are legal here is what's on your license, hunting license. So you can go bird watching, sightseeing, hiking, deer hunting, looking for small game. You might just be scouting for what you're going to hunt. Turkey, waterfowl, and actually, if I was updating this for this most recent year, about last few weekends, they've seen a big pulse in just recreation. They had about 80 people. We had some really nice weather. No additional advertisement. It's just suddenly been discovered. So 80 people, multiple days, multiple weekends. That's new. So where are folks coming from that are coming out to Cracker Neck? It's typically about 21 South Carolina counties and 4 states. As you'd imagine, some of the closer counties, Aiken, Anderson, Edgefield, Lexington, and Barnwell counties are the typical visitors. Out-of-state visitors also include Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. Typically, as you'd expect, are closer. Not a lot of people from Hawaii or Alaska. Oh, and by the way, this is a Skin Face Pond. That's a popular fishing site. It's easy access. You can roll right up to it. Management partners. So as I'd mentioned earlier, it's a 60-40 split in terms of the funding. It's provided by DOE and SCDNR. And they also work with the U.S. Forest Service out on site, who also assist with management of timber, fire, road maintenance, and habitat restoration. And they also, South Carolina DNR is also partnered with, as you can see on this sign is one of the examples, Forest Service and DOE, as I mentioned, but also the National Wild Turkey Federation and the Longleaf Alliance. These private organizations provide additional emphasis or funding to create new opportunities and habitat restoration. In this case, arranging special hunts, hunting opportunities, and grants for habitat restoration, as I've mentioned. And these projects expand the access to the public. So you'll see some of these areas here in a minute. The DNR employees themselves are doing these things well and working with the Forest Service. So they're typically establishing food plots, they're maintaining their fire breaks and roads. The roads are also maintained by the Forest Service. Forest Service works with them on thinning, regeneration, and prescribed fire. They're currently working on a wetland restoration project where they're doing a little bit of ditch plugging, restoring some Carolina bays, and of course they're staffing that check station. This is a special use dub field that was recently created. There will be the first hunt coming up here in November, and that was one of these cooperative partnerships with multiple entities. As you can see, Forest Service, DNR, DOE, Turkey Federation, and the Longleaf Alliance. And the field will host hunts from women in the outdoors, first responders, mobility impaired, typically people less likely to have an opportunity to get out. Another habitat restoration area. This is just over 100 acres out there. It's emphasizing quail management. This particular management emphasis is focusing on the entire life cycle of quail. So from breeding, nesting, and rearing. And this work is another cooperative effort. And you can see, so this is one of the machines out there used for taking down the understory so that we can successfully use prescribed fire to remove the vegetation and maintain that vegetation at a low cost. anyone has any questions, I just wanted to also interject that Crackerneck is the 6th largest of about 90 wildlife management areas in the state. So doesn't necessarily receive a lot of press. Like I said, it's one of these hidden gems, but it's certainly a valuable resource.
All right, questions from around the table? Charles, I see you got your card. Let's start with you.
Are you allowed, Charles Hilton Cab, are you allowed to keep the game and fish that you,
Yes,
thank you.
it's a real bummer when you got to turn it all back, but I know catch and release folks like that.
Well, you do on the site itself in the hunts, don't you? You don't get to keep it?
So on the site itself, you do get to keep it.
Okay.
They monitor it on site. One of the things that I didn't bring up here is the reason why they can allow this to occur is there was no industrial use in this area. Right? And this is upstream and away from any of the industrial uses. And that's why this is an allowable activity.
Mike, you want to expand on that?
Well,
Or did you have another comment? Sorry.
I had another comment, but
Go.
the fish is the only thing you can't take. We don't allow them to take the fish. Yeah,
Fishing they all time.
no, no. But I do, what is that picture on the right-hand side? What is it? I can't make it out.
Oh, cypress knees?
Not familiar with it. Cypress, what is it?
Cypress, so when you get in wetter areas, cypress trees grow and they push up bits of roots, what they call knees. And actually they're very commonly harvested to make different bits of cypress art or trinkets.
Just showing my New York heritage there.
Well, it'd be more eastern larch up that way.
Charles, did you have more?
Is the quail recovery efforts being successful? That's tough to do.
Yes, it is difficult to do. And obviously, as you're aware, it's a population that's been in decline for some years. So this is like a new effort. I guess I should say not a new effort, it's an expanded effort, and hence some of the cooperators that we have there with Forest Service and the others. We're hopeful. I mean, they made really good progress with some of the harvesting out there and the understory removal, and hopefully we can keep prescribed fire out there to make that habitat useful.
Okay. Narendra?
Thank you for the presentation, Narendra Malik, CAB. Is there any biodiversity in the park?
Absolutely. I mean, there's biodiversity all across the site, but Crackerneck is also the ecological reserve. So the diversity in habitats that I had mentioned, bottomland hardwoods, upland pines, and the Carolina bays, those themselves have considerable diversity. There is one of the bays out in the Crackerneck area that has the gopher frog, a gopher frog population in it, if I recall correctly. That's a species potentially being listed.
I have a second follow-up question. Have you developed any nature trail so that the school kids or somebody can come and walk around with the pamphlet? In this section 1, it has this kind of vegetation and population of animals or birds of this kind appear in this area, and go around maybe about half a mile long nature trail?
So I don't know that that's currently out there, but we can see if there's some interest in doing that. I know up in north of 278, which is in a different section of the site, there's a potential that Savannah River Ecology Lab with the University of Georgia may expand what they're doing up there to make more of those opportunities available. But this is certainly something worth considering, and I'll bring it back up to the DNR.
Thank you. Probably we might have a recommendation for that. Thank you.
Phyllis?
Phyllis Britt, CAB. 2 questions. Is the hunting and fishing ever open to just anybody, or is it always special groups?
No. So that one particular dove field, that's the regulated. That's
Gotcha.
everything else is open. So when there's a day for dove hunt, anyone can come. When there's deer season, anyone can come. Anyone can come on any of these days. Just that particular area is specific hunt emphasis.
And do you have to go through some sort of application process to come?
No,
No,
no.
they just show up? Really? Wow,
It's open to the public.
thank you.
Saturdays, pop in on Saturdays. Not, it's not open from June to August for a reason.
Any other questions or comments from around the table? Andy, you flew through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so there's going to be a slight pause while we get one presenter unhooked from a microphone and get the next one put up. But draw your attention to the agenda. The next two items are kind of linked together. So you're going to see that there's a H Canyon presentation and then there's an accelerated basin de-inventory presentation. And these kind of go a little bit hand in hand. You remember they were originally on the schedule for May. We weren't able to do it then. We have the opportunity to do it now, so we'll be doing these today. The H Canyon presentation is essentially how H Canyon operations work today, right? The next presentation will be how H Canyon operations will function under the ABD initiative. So keep these in mind that these are going to go hand in hand as we move through these next two presentations, okay? Any questions about that before we get started? Thank goodness, because I can't answer any of them anyway. But Matt can. So we're going to let Matt come up and we'll get going with his H Canyon overview.
All right, just wanted to make sure I was on, good to go. All right, good morning, I'm Matt Arnold. I'm going to give an overview of H Canyon, kind of the history and the way it was designed. So H area is centrally located in the Savannah River site. As you can see from the map here, H area is right in the center of the site. So it's a radiochemical nuclear facility. It was designed to take solid fuel, dissolve it into a liquid, and then be able to process through a chemical separation process to separate the actinides from the rest of the material. And I'll give you a little bit more information as I go through the slides on how that works. It's got a lot of capabilities. It's very flexible, so over the years it's been able to change and do different missions that I'll cover in a few minutes as well. And we have an experienced workforce of about 450 people that support or operate the facility. About 150 of those actually are in operations and run the facility. The rest are all support, or radiological support and maintenance to keep it up and running. It was built in the 1950s, so it's been around for quite a while. It's gone through a lot of different mission changes over the years. As you can see, as they built it, they just started from one side and worked towards the other one. And I'll show you a little more detailed picture of how it's laid out in a minute. But you can see the guts of the facility in this picture, just how it was being built in the past. So originally it was set up to recover plutonium from fuel missions. Over the years, it's transitioned. We've used it to process Pu-238 that went into the Cassini mission, and that was used as a heat source for powering that satellite into the space. And that was done in the early 1990s. Then in the 2000s, that transitioned over to processing spent nuclear fuel. And we've done several different missions of that type of fuel, and that continues through today. We're processing that spent nuclear fuel through the facility right now. Some other missions that we've done in 2017 to 19, we processed material that came from another country. We recovered it in our facility, and we're able to use that for one of our uranium sources. And then, of course, what you're going to hear today is some more about the ABD mission change that was approved this year and kind of the transition over to that new mission. So the way that the canyon is built and laid out is it repeats 18 different sections, and it's the same repeated from section 5 through 18. So we have the same thing over and over, so we can, if we need to change something up, it's the same process from cell 5 or cell 18. We can make a change to it and and it's very flexible. The facility itself is about 3 football fields long and 4 stories tall. So that just gives you a feel for the size of the facility. It's also separated into 2 canyons, the hot and the warm. That's just because we have steep walls separated by an opening where all of our tanks are contained. So we have 2 canyons, and it's just laid out over 4 levels. And in the center here, where all the white areas of the facility is the areas where people can access. So up on 4th level, that's where the control rooms are located, so we can manipulate or move material from one place to another in the facility. The 3rd level just contains our tanks for adding chemicals like acid and caustic. The 2nd level is our piping for steam, water, and instrumentation is where that's laid out. And then the 1st level is just our personnel access and radiological control areas as well. And some of our other air compressors are located down on the 1st level as well. The hot and warm canyon, we access those by using cranes. Those are remotely accessed, so people don't go into those areas. Our tanks are located below the ground level, so you can see a comparison of an individual relative to the size of the facility, and they're standing on ground level, so all the tanks are below ground. And as I mentioned, the cranes allow us to access the equipment if we have to make a change to it. But the way this was designed and laid out, we have as few moving parts as possible out there. And that way we don't have to go out and work on equipment because we don't have things that break out there. We use steam to move liquid from one tank to another. So that way we reduce the moving parts. So we can open up a valve, we send the steam in, it goes through an adductor jet that changes the pressure and sucks the liquid up out of one tank and deposits it to the next tank. And of course, some of the steam condenses into liquid, so we have an increase in volume of about 3% every time we make a transfer, but that just is part of the process, and we have plenty of tank capacity to handle that increase in volume. This shows you a picture of the inside of the warm canyon, shows you with all the tanks and all the piping runs. So when we transfer from one tank, it'll come up, go down this piping run, and drop into another tank. So that's all contained inside the canyon. And you can see how many different piping connections we have. Some of those are instrumentation, some of that's just to move items from the liquid from one spot to another. We have agitators hooked up to the tanks. That's about the one and only item that we have in there that is a moving part that we routinely, or every so often, we do have to replace one of those. This just gives you a closer view looking down on the tanks and the nozzles. So if we have to make a change to one of these connections, we have to take our crane out there, and we have a wrench that we can lower onto that nozzle, and it works just like your screwdriver at home. It's just a bigger version of that. It lowers down there, goes right on top of the connection of the nozzle, and we can loosen it, remove a jumper, move it to a different location, and do the reverse order of that and reconnect it to a different location. So it's very flexible as far as us if we need to make a change in our process. Typical tank has a set of cooling and heating coils. We heat with steam, cool with cooling water. It has an agitator to mix the contents. We have a sampler, and then the tank sits up off the floor a few inches. The floors are sloped, and so we can flush the floors if periodically we do that just to make sure that they're kept clean around the tanks. And a typical tank can hold about 5,000 gallons of liquid in there.
Excuse me, is it all nitric acid in that, in the tank?
Ask that again, please. Can you repeat?
In the tank which you showed, this one, it says 5,000 gallon it holds. Is it all acid in it, or what is?
It is acidic solution that we use. Yes, because our dissolving process, when we convert acidic process to convert that over. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. We use the acid plus heat to dissolve material. This shows a picture of our crane control room. So we operate these remotely. They have 10 different cameras so they can look down. So this is a very challenging job to learn. It takes about 2 years to be proficient as a crane operator because they're looking at cameras looking down into the cells, and they have to use the camera angles to determine how far they are away from the connection they're trying to get to. So they have to use shadows to determine exactly how close they are. So as they lower the wrench, for example, they have to make sure that they're using the light, the shadows of the light down there to make adjustments for that. It's a very challenging job because you get basically a two-dimensional